In the past 2 months, Russia launched its brutal attack and has moved weapons and equipment to Ukraine. We've moved weapons and equipment to Ukraine in record speed. Thanks to the aid we provided, Russian forces have been forced to retreat from Kyiv. Doesn't mean they're not going to try to come back, but they've retreated thus far. We've sent thousands of anti-armor, anti-missiles, helicopters, drones, grenade launchers, machine guns, rifles, radar systems, more than 50 million rounds of ammunition. The United States alone has provided 10 anti-armor systems for every Russian tank that is in Ukraine, 10 to 1. We're providing Ukraine significant, timely intelligence to help them defend themselves against the Russian onslaught. And we're facilitating a significant flow of weapons and systems to Ukraine from our allies and partners around the world, including tanks, artillery, and other weapons. That support is moving with unprecedented speed. Much of the new equipment we've announced in the past 2 weeks has already gotten to Ukraine, where it can be put to direct use on the battlefield. However, we've almost exhausted what we call, the fancy phrase, the drawdown authority that Congress authorized for Ukraine in a bipartisan spending bill last month. Basically, we're out of money. And so that's why today, in order to sustain Ukraine as it continues to fight, I'm sending Congress a supplemental budget request. It's going to keep weapons and ammunition flowing without interruption to the brave Ukrainian fighters and continue delivering economic and humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainian people. This so-called supplemental funding addresses the needs of the Ukrainian military during the critical weeks and months ahead. And it begins the transition to longer-term security assistance that's going to help Ukraine deter and continue to defend against Russian aggression.
Just remember, the same people who are giving us this war in Ukraine, who facilitated it by training the ultra-separatists to enact a coup in 2014 against an elected president, Viktor Yushchenko, and then replace him with an interim government in which Volodymyr Zelensky was then elected as president by the same people who forced out their previous president because he was somebody who was allied to the Russians. These same people gave us the conflicts in Libya and Syria. And this is not a Democrat bashing video, because I can make the same video in regards to the Republicans who have given us Iraq, Afghanistan, Iraq twice, Afghanistan, and the Patriot Act, as well as giving expansionary powers to the NSA and CIA. But the Democrat Party is supposed to be the liberal party. And yet you are the same people who are supporting warmongers and sociopaths to represent you in office. These are not liberals. These are establishment types who owe an allegiance to the private military industrialists like Raytheon and Boeing and LG3 Technologies and Raytheon, as well as their foreign interests like Russia, Israel, the Gulf, Egypt, and their coalition partners, Germany, France, Australia, Denmark. We have a lot of interest regarding what is happening with Ukraine because the same people who are revisiting the Cold War cannot go back and fight against Al-Qaeda because we destroyed them. So now as we move away from the Middle East, we will now entertain the Cold War. And what's next on the plate? China and Iran, just like in 1979. Just a few years ago, the Obama administration had invaded Libya with no uncertain terms. We didn't really military invade it, but we instigated that conflict and conducted a coup. Now, Gaddafi was somebody who was no angel, but even though he had built North Africa to be a financial country that wasn't relying on the Western dollar, he promised, the United States promised him amnesty and promised also to the Gaddafi military regime amnesty to those who abandoned their weapons. NATO, which was led by the US, bombed Libyan government forces and installations, which were backed by the insurgents offensive. These insurgents were, as they call, rebels. In other words, they're Salafi jihadists, Al-Qaeda affiliates. And it was not a humanitarian intervention, but a lengthy, costly regime change war, just like what we saw in Syria the same year in 2011. And in that respect, we actually were covertly funding Al-Qaeda affiliates, called them rebels, and so did the media like CNN and MSNBC. And that operation was called Timber Sycamore. I've done about 3 videos based on that. Please watch those. Just type in Timber Sycamore in my YouTube search bar and it'll come up to get an understanding of what Timber Sycamore was about, in which we spent, along with Turkey, Jordan, and Israel, led by the CIA under David Petraeus, in which he outlined a plan to overthrow the Assad administration and implement a Western-backed leader. It failed because Assad actually fought back, and his intelligence services were quite spry and found out about the project. One thing about Alawites, Muslims, is they're not like foreign Arabs. They're not reactionaries, but they're very crafty people and very intelligent. That's why we have a hard time trying to engage a war with Iran, because their allies are Lebanon and Syria. And we're trying to destabilize these regions through sanctions and through proxy wars to destroy what is left of their governments. But as you can see, to the Democratic Party, you can't say to the Republicans that they're neocons and warmongers when you're the same. And this is something that I've mentioned previously before regarding geopolitics and regarding foreign interests. There is no dual party. There is no bipartisanship. There is only one party. Because all of you of the left and right act as one when it comes to the real powers at play here, which are your foreign interests and the Pentagon, as well as the Federal Reserve, who are giving you money through the Senate appropriation committees, which you have to go annually to and beg for more money to engage in these conflicts. Now, they don't go to black operations. That comes through illegal monies, drugs, for example. But for operations that are crafted by the CIA or the DIA or the Pentagon, you go to the Senate Appropriations Committee and ask for funding and engaging against a conflict that you claim are detrimental to democracy. I find that to be quite ironic, because the United States government is a detriment to hegemony anywhere it goes, whether it's the Middle East, the Balkans, Eastern Europe, or Southeast Asia. Doesn't matter. Central America. Doesn't matter where the United States goes. And as where as it goes, we're not there to spread democracy or care about the suffrage of the poor people. Look what we do to our own citizens here where it counts. That's why I tell people never to vote. Stop voting. And if you want to make a change, vote for, say, the Libertarian Party or a Green Party. Get rid of the Democratic Republican parties. Do not support them. Do you see what's happening in your name here in this country and abroad? The countries like Libya and Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, where we killed millions of people through economic sanctions and then through military intervention, these people will never forgive us, and they shouldn't, until we make the right change. And that change has to come from us, the American people. And so I'll end the video like this. If you're anti-war, and if you're against institutions, ghoulish institutions like the Federal Reserve, or the intelligence apparatuses like the CIA and the DIA and the NSA, illegal wiretapping of civilians, reading our private emails, well, then you have to make the next step. We have to get out of our comfort zone and protest as one. But we are not going to be able to do that if we're divided along political, racial, religious lines, which the establishment is currently instigating. Because heaven forbid for them that we pull the proverbial IV of our arm and not play this game anymore and demand real change against the establishment, then we're forever going to be victims of the crimes that they commit, and not just on us, but to people abroad in our name.